Hey everyone, welcome to Tuesday with Adam on the PPP loan forgiveness and a whole bunch of stuff about PPP today, I'm sure. Welcome to everybody. If you have that Q&A button below, you should, unless Zoom is shortchanging you, hit those. We've got some Q&As that have come through or questions via email. We'll also address those. And Adam has an explainer video where he wants to do an explainer deal on the front end of this thing. So Adam, you want to go ahead and take it?
Yeah, sure. I'll share the screen here in a second. But, a lot of the questions that we've had are around people that have received funds or funds are imminent to be deposited. It's funny, my text is blowing up. Congratulations, Greg. I'm getting funded today by Fifth Third. But at the same time, they don't have any revenue, and they've started, and they've laid people off. So their questions are really around, how am I going to spend the money, and what the head count, all that kind of stuff. So what I put together was a cash flow projection that shows what you would have to do, given actually a shockingly very typical example. So if Mike and Brian are listening in on this, it's not quite your scenario, but it's pretty close. The example is a dental practice that shut down, that is going to resume operations sometime during their PPP funding. Now, if we can't resume operations within the PPP window, that's a whole different game plan, or a whole different ball game. But I feel like everything we're seeing now, I think it feels like we're probably going to be doing something, at least on a limited basis, sometime in May. So I think the reality of not generating any revenue in the June timeframe is pretty limited. But at the same time, you can still also adopt the wait and see approach and have this be your game plan, unless we have to come up with a different game plan because, hey, we're still shut down in May and it's looking like we're going to be shut down in June. So with that in mind, let me go ahead and hop into this scenario, and hopefully you guys will be able to see this. All right. As always, well, I guess you didn't get to see my screen there. Okay, so yeah. I know it's a little bit on the small side, so I'll try to blow it up here. This is on my iPad, so I have a little bit better features here. So in this scenario for the dental practice, I had $35,000 sitting in the bank. So I've really been operating on life support at this point, trying to keep the band together. And my Paycheck Protection Program funding is for $350,000 based on my payroll. My rent's $13,000 a month, and I don't really have any other equipment leases or anything else that might otherwise qualify in that 25% bucket. But if I did, the example still holds. So for me to hit my targets, my payroll needs to be $262,500. That's 75%. And my rents need to be $87,500 to be at the 25% to maximize forgiveness. And my total employee count by the end of the forgiveness period, which is right here, needs to be 28. So knowing I'm probably not going to hit the average FTE count over the time period because I've laid everybody off since I can't operate, I just need to be at that point by this week over here, 6/10/2020. So you see the first problem out of the gate is that if I've got 2 rent cycles, that's only $26,000, which is way less than $87,500. So the only way I'm going to get the rent part done is if I prepay some of the rent. So in this scenario, what I would do, keeping in mind that I have 4 doctors, first thing that I would do is, if I had been on a biweekly payroll, I'm going to go to a weekly payroll. That's going to ensure that I've got all my payroll accounted for. And if I had any scenario where I've been paying in arrears by 2 weeks or whatever, I would go ahead and get that caught up. because this is how we believe right now the banks are going to be checking your payroll. So we'll see if I can bring up a formula here. Yeah, so basically this equals 4 doctors at 100 grand. Now they were making more than $100,000 prior to this, but there's no point in paying them over 100 grand during the forgiveness period at 52 weeks a year. So my payroll is going to be $76.92 every single week. What I'm also going to start doing is I'm also going to start prepaying rent to myself. So as you can see here, I've got 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 4.5 months of rent that I'm effectively prepaying, in addition to paying my current rent right there. So let's say that I get the notice that, hey, all things look like we're going to be back in business in June. So that's right over here. So I'm going to start collecting money in June. But what you can see when I blow this out is that, typical dental practice, I've got a combination of cash payments and insurance reimbursement. So even though I may be full board 630, I'm really not going to be getting the insurance reimbursements until, really a month later. So I'm going to have kind of a gradual ramp up on the cash collection side. And then my other practice expenses that I've got to fund are pretty limited because they've been shut down, but they're really going to kick back into place in terms of labs and everything else right about here. So this would be just basic maintenance costs. So what I'm going to do is, knowing that I'm going to open in June, I'm going to bring these 24 people back right here. So if you look at the cell reference here, let's see which one I did the formula in, because I had to goal seek this to try to get to when do I need to bring people back to maximize forgiveness. What I'm going to do here is that if these people right here typically made on average 50K a year, I'm going to go ahead and take them up to 100, which is effectively prepaying them payroll. So what you see is that I've got a whole bunch of payroll here, but then I've got no payroll right here, because I basically funded the June, July time period in May through June, in early June, during my forgiveness window, which nothing right now says that you cannot do that. So that's going to be our strategy, is we're going to pre-fund payroll. I'm doing it weekly to make sure that I got it in. And they're still going to be at their $50,000 annualized number, because I'm not going to pay them during this window here. So when you sum all this stuff up, we're pretty darn close to the maximum forgiveness amount, which our payroll lands there, our rent lands there, and the remaining debt lands there at $16,000. Didn't quite consume the payroll. If I wanted to, I could do a little bit of payroll right here to eat up that $16,000. But I felt like this is close enough for the purposes of this exercise. So, this is a dental practice, but same concepts can apply if you're a restaurant, or any other business that really doesn't have any revenue. And, really the only variance, if you make something or you have to buy products, is you're going to have to, probably have an inventory replenish somewhere here too. But this is the model that everybody needs to start, type of model that everybody needs to start working on now, in terms of what are they going to have to change to get maximum forgiveness within their 8-week window, which is right here. And it really comes down to, you're going to have to pay people more. So as you can see, doctors get restored right here back on the normal payroll cycle. But again, I'm not paying the hygienist or the receptionist or anybody else for this window right here, because I paid them right in here. I'm also not paying rent either, because I prepaid that too. So as you can see, go ahead and play this out a little bit more. Really, my ending cash position is actually looking pretty darn nice based on my forgiveness amount. So I didn't do the math on this, but if I did 350 plus 35, I actually ended up in a better spot than I started at, because I made a little bit of profit during these periods as well. So that's how I would try to get it done. Go ahead and stop broadcasting and try to come back here. All right, I think we're back now.
Great job, man. You ready for some questions?
Sure, fired up.
All right. This first one is from Vicky, and this is a pretty detailed scenario, so hang with me. We applied for our PPP loan with number 2 bank. We pay all of our payroll and bills out of our number 1 bank. Our loan has now been funded by bank number 2. The requirement of the PPP loan is to use the loan proceeds on payroll, rent, etc. We were going to leave the PPP loan proceeds in bank number 2 since they did all the processing work. That bank number 2 account funds our self-insured group medical claims, but perhaps we need to transfer all the PPP loan funds over to bank number 1, commingle our money for about a week, and then move the money back to bank 2. Do you think it would be advisable to transfer these funds back to bank 1 in case there ends up being an actual tracing of the money?
I think what will likely, again, it's all going to be up to your banker, and I feel like this needs to be as idiot-proof as possible. And I'm not calling bankers idiots. I'm just saying that what we found is that the more simple and straightforward we made the application process, the faster people got through the system. And I think the same concept will apply to forgiveness. So in that case, if you think about what's going to be the evidentiary material, it's likely going to be, some sort of expense reporting that could come out of your accounting file, some sort of payroll reporting that will come from your payroll provider, and then they're going to want to see evidence that the money actually left your account. So if I'm the bank that gave you the money, I would probably not care too much which account that it came to, but it would be easier for me if it came out of my account. So in that scenario, I would transfer money back and forth and pay bills out of whichever places gave you the original funding. And same thing applies. I mean, we've had a couple scenarios where, two different companies got funded, payroll sitting in 2 spots. To make the math work, if you temporarily have to move people from one payroll to another, just to get the employee count right and the wage count right to get the maximum forgiveness, I would plan on that's something that you're going to have to do.
So this question kind of relates to your first scenario. Can a bonus be issued to employees during the last week of the forgiveness period to use the remaining payroll funds?
Yeah, the only thing that's going to be interesting to think about is that somehow you would have to, if the bonus is so large that if I applied that out, it looked like I made more than $100,000 annually, somehow there's going to have to be some supporting backup to demonstrate now, it's a bonus, but the guy's only going to make 75 for the year. So I would be, since you're delaying doing it anyway, you've got a little bit of time for additional guidance to come out, but I would be very careful about any bonus that if I prorated it out, had somebody make more than 100 grand. So I'd be planning for multiple bonuses right now versus one bonus at the last second, which is why in the scenario I've got people coming back, 3-4 weeks before the opening day, which doesn't necessarily make sense, but from hey, I don't really need him yet. But again, our goal here is we're going for maximum forgiveness when we know that we're going to generate revenue again.
Cool. Next question. I received $66,000 from 3 different banks for 3 different businesses. Now we need to pay employees over the next 8 weeks. We received funding on Monday, April the 20th. All right. So all businesses are C Corps. All my employees would rather stay home since the money for unemployment is 30% more than they get working. So here's his problem. And this is from Mike. what is SBA looking at when we submit backup paperwork to show that some employees came back to work? We only have to show pay stub and copy of check, I think. So that's one. There are 4 steps on here. The second is, can we pay anyone if we bring in a new people that need a job? 3, do we take payroll tax out, or did the IRS stop withholding also Social Security and Medicare? And the 4th one, step by step, can you put out an email for us, really small businesses?
Okay. Yeah. So that was, whether it's $350,000 or it's, 66 each company. Mike, you always got to overcomplicate things, don't you, buddy? I want that sailboat that somebody abandoned out of this one. In that scenario, I think you probably may have to do a little bit of the overpayment from the model that I just showed you. So in kind of reverse order, yeah, we'll stick out an explainer video and a template probably today or tomorrow based on what we just went through. With respect to the payroll taxes, you do have to let your payroll company know that that's something that you want to do. And it's the employer portion of Social Security taxes that you're allowed to defer. The employee stuff you still need to be paying. With respect to what are they going to ask for, it's going to be, some sort of payroll record that indicates that you actually pay people, but it doesn't have to be the same people. I don't mean to sound mean in saying this, but we have had quite a few clients that have used this as a one-time do-over on talent restructuring. So if there are different people that come back, that's fine. All that said, I don't think that you're going to get a pass for people not wanting to return to work on your FTE count, because the whole idea was you were supposed to use the money to keep people employed. I get that they're making more on unemployment, but it's just something that you're going to have to, factor into the equation, whether it's a, hey, by the way, knucklehead, you ain't going to have a job when you come back. Because, I think really, I don't know what the employee market's going to look like when this is over. I mean, there's a ton of people on unemployment now. So while there may be abundant jobs, if you quit, especially if you left on bad terms as part of the layoff process, I don't know. I mean, there's a good chance you're not going to get invited back on the island. So I probably would be using that to my advantage in terms of staying in touch with the employees to say, hey, you're going to get back on the island, but I'm just telling you, as part of coming back on the island, here's what I'm going to need from you.
Great point. Next question. If we rehire employees and reinstate salaries and wages at 6:30, is there a requirement that these wage levels are sustained for a certain period?
No. Current, absent further guidance, literally it could be the stroke of midnight, 6:30, as long as you deployed the money and have the headcount right.
All right, this is from Phil. I have a friend who's on Social Security files tax returns. She's not filed her 2019 return. Will that delay her $1,200 stimulus deposit?
The only thing that I'd heard of that had delayed the stimulus deposit is if you didn't have a bank account number or routing number on file. Everybody else, I've heard that it's gone okay.
I had one example where they filed 2018 but haven't filed 2019 yet, and they filed electronically and they still haven't received their stimulus check. That's a data point of 1, but whatever it's worth. Who knows why? This is from Paul. Does the 8 weeks start the day the loan docs are signed, the day the money hits the account, or some other time?
The day the money hits the account. And remember, everybody needs to be thinking that it's 56 days, not 8 weeks.
Great point. He has 3 other questions on here. Prorating expenses. Should expenses be prorated down to the day?
I don't know. Again, they haven't given any guidance around cash basis or accrual basis accounting. So at this point, I would plan on it being cash basis, meaning the bank's going to want to see the money left the building. which would imply that you're not prorating down to the day. It's just going to be bills that you paid, which is why I would advocate, even if you have to break stuff up into weekly payments, go that route so that you've got, assume the worst, that there's going to have to be evidence of cash leaving the building, which is why you may need to break stuff down into weekly increments.
Next question from Paul. Other than health insurance, can we use any other insurance benefits paid by the company, dental, vision, life?
I think you could probably get dental and vision to hunt because they're health related. Life and disability, I would not plan on including.
The last question from Paul is, what evidence do we need to provide as documentation for payroll since the 8-week period will not tie to a 941?
So I'm sure that the payroll companies are going to be able to produce a report, just like they did for the PPP calculations. So it'll be something that you get from your payroll provider. Again, all that said though, I would plan on having to modify payroll periods to suit this specific purpose versus trying to make the dog hunt on an accrued wage calculation, pending further guidance.
All right, cool. Man, we've got a lot of folks on this one. We've got 122 people and a bunch of questions, so we'll just rocket through these. What are the requirements for the PPP loan to be forgiven? If you could just restate that. This is for Terry.
Just got to spend the money. So you need to have 75% of the money needs to be spent on payroll, and that's people that make less than $100,000. 25% can be for rent, utilities, and other rent-like items like equipment leases, stuff like that. All that said, if you spend more on payroll, that's not bad, but it's got to be at least 75%. The second is whatever headcount you had in either one of 3 periods, and I apologize if this gets a little bit confusing, but period number 1 is what you reported originally. Period number 2 is February 15th, 2019 through 6/30/2019, that average FTE count. And number 3 is January 2020 through February 2020. Those are your 3 options from an FTE comparative standpoint, that if your average now is the same as the average during one of those 3 periods, then you pass. If you didn't, then you have to get the head count to match what you originally reported against one of those 3 test periods by the time that your loan is forgiven, which just means rehiring people quickly. And then lastly, it only matters up to $75,000, but if you made anybody take pay cuts, then they have to be restored to at least $75,000 by the end of the loan forgiveness period. Reason it's $75,000 is that the cap is $100,000 on wages anyway. So if you had a guy making 200 that you brought down to 100, you don't have to do anything with that person. You just have to do same scenario, making 200, brought him down to 50. You at least need to restore him to 75.
All right, great. Next question is from an anonymous attendee here. It says, can we pay managers and sales staff an increased salary and hourly rate during this 8-week period to cover monthly bonuses and commissions that they could earn in the future months? Then in future months, just not have bonuses and commissions, have them work just for a salary or hourly rate for a couple months after that 8-week period. This would allow us to save money after the 8-week period.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what the scenario that we just went through illustrated that you're going to have to do.
All right, cool. All right, David from our friends at Clean Juice. By the way, I didn't have time to go there this morning before you or after you're open. So I will go there today. Clean Juice, we love you. We have about 10 outstanding PPP loan applications still pending with a certain bank, and I won't name that bank. They aren't saying anything about our status, but have given us an SBA number for each loan application. Hopefully Congress will put in additional funds, but if not, do you think we are likely to get funded since we have the funds quote unquote reserved with an SBA number. What should we do until we wait to hear? This bank has been our business bank, but just not responding to inquiries this week. It's frustrating. And we've seen that a lot from bigger banks, and this is a bigger bank. Any thoughts on that one, Adam?
Yeah. So we've had a lot of clients that have been in that same boat. So I'll back up and say, and I may get the terminology incorrect, but the last milestone is when you sign the loan document. So if you sign the loan document, the banks are required to fund within 10 days. If they say that you have an SBA number, and I think E-Tran number maybe is the correct terminology, that we've seen just about everybody that's had one of those ultimately get funded. And I can't really give you a good explanation as to why they haven't given you loan docs yet, other than, either A, backlog, or B, they're just really trying to triple dog verify that the funding is actually going to be available for you before holding out a loan document. So, maybe they're being super conservative. All that said, Congress is supposed to pass today the recharge legislation, which I think is $300 additional billion. I think there's a tremendous backlog of applications probably currently sitting with larger banks right now. So, let's plan on the fact that this is probably going to get utilized in a week to week and a half this go round. So if you haven't got an application in, or your bank has flat out told you no, this is, we need to get on it. We need to get on it, like today or tomorrow to get into round 2.
So David's got a follow-on question, and one thing that let's do this this afternoon. I've got back-to-backs, David, but let's schedule some time because I know somebody at that bank that can probably get some stuff done for you. So let's just talk offline. But here's his follow-on question. Are you really confident this prepayment of rent and payroll method is going to pass muster with the banks and the SBA? I get that it's not prohibited yet, but it seems like it violates the spirit of the program, which is to bring back people and pay them.
You're right, but I don't have a better answer. So that's why I keep on caveating it with, if we're going for maximum forgiveness, this really is it. At the same time, if you kind of roll back the clock to Mike's question earlier, it's that, and at the same time, man, on unemployment right now, I mean, granted, you have to get the check, but in North Carolina, that's the equivalent of you making $60,000 a year. I know it's $48,000, but taxes aren't coming out. So it would be hard to incentivize someone to come back on your payroll for $35,000 a year when they're effectively with taxes taken out, when they're effectively making $60,000 a year. So I think it just is what it is, absent other guidance. So I think, how can I make myself feel better? If you go back to the example that I showed, yeah, I'm paying people more than I necessarily had to, but the other case that I can make for that is, yeah, because I know there's a chance I might have to stick them back on unemployment for the month of July if I can't get open. So I think that would be a way that I would justify, well, I really am meeting the spirit of the law. And if I happen to have generated some revenue in that time period, so be it.
So Melissa asked this question. The rehire section seems to imply that we have to rehire specific people, but you're saying we could have lost an employer prior to the PPP and hire a different person whose salary is not less than 75% of what the person who left, and avoid a reduction of our forgiveness, correct?
Yeah, that's our interpretation as of today. It's not the same. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same people, because you can't really control for that.
Exactly. Next question from Paul. Can you pay rents to a related party or common ownership company?
Yeah, nothing prohibits that currently. again, same caveats we made before, you know, a lease was supposed to have been in place as of February 15th. So if you don't have one of those, you should get one. And then secondly, you know, I wouldn't go modifying the rent to be significantly above market either. But outside of that, there's nothing that prohibits related party payments currently.
Okay, this is from Anonymous, and I think it can get a little confusing, but I know you'll clarify it. I thought the minimum payroll was 75%. Adam's example implies there's a max. Can you clarify?
The minimum is 75%. The max is 100%. The max that I'm referencing in the example is that the individual annualized salary level maximum is $100,000. So if I get 75, you know, generically, if someone made $100,000 and that's exactly what I got for PPP, you know, I can use 75,000 of that to pay payroll. Thus, it doesn't make any sense for me to pay that person more than $100,000 because it's excluded from the forgiveness calculation. So that might have been the max the person's referencing.
Yeah, I think this is from the same person. It says if we have corporate or maintenance employees that we agree to pay them a higher hourly or salary wage during the 8-week period and then reduce hourly or salary pay for the remaining weeks of the year, in total, they'd make the same dollars for the remainder of the year. Can we do that?
Yeah, there's nothing that precludes that now. You're just going to have to make sure that you've established enough trust that the employee is going to go with that.
This is from Robert. What if your FTE count only gets to half its former level?
Then it's basically a pro rata calculation on the forgiveness. But, you know, I've had a few calls. Hopefully there's not any Department of the Treasury people on the phone right now, but, you know, you can also get pretty creative in who goes on your payroll, you know, brother, sister, wife, husband, kids. I mean, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat to get on the payroll number.
Yeah, its bottom line is FTE count, not necessarily who, and being capped at $100,000.
That's it.
And maintaining that if somebody, let's say it was at $100,000, they don't go below 75 because there's a 25% max.
Right.
All right, this is from John. If our loan is April 25 through June 25, what day do I need to have my employee number back to 100% for full loan forgiveness?
Reminder, it's 56 days, so it probably won't be exactly June 25th, but for this example, June 25th.
Yeah. This is from Chris. Can a bonus be issued to employees during the last week of the forgiveness period to use remaining payroll funds?
Yeah, so we answered that one. I would be very careful right now that if I annualize that one payroll run, if that looked like the person would make more than 100 grand, you know, that's the only thing I'd be concerned about. So I break it up into right now, pending further guidance, I break it up into smaller payment amounts.
All right, this one is from the CFO of our favorite Salesforce implementation company, Carrie. If you have payroll costs to account for more than 75% of forgiveness, I'm assuming that's not an issue. You just can't have more than 25% of forgivable costs from other expenses, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the way that our own calculation is working right now at BGW, we're going to be at about 85%.
Oh, we got good news here from Jan. We are celebrating with you right now. It says, I just got funded from BB&T yesterday. Yay.
Okay. First one that I've heard from BB&T, so that's great.
Yeah, that's the first I've heard too.
If there's any First Citizens people out there, it would be great to hear something positive out of First Citizens.
10-4. So their calculations have excluded federal payroll taxes in my loan funding amount. I know there was some back and forth about this definition that may have been cleared up with the latest guidelines. Do you agree with that calculation?
Employer taxes are not included. Employee taxes should have been included. So if you think about federal taxes, we always think of it as 15%, but what's technically happening is 7.5% is funded by the employee, that gets counted. The other 7.5% is funded by the employer, that is not counted. So if they did not include the employer portion, that is correct in their calculation.
Okay, this is from Robert. We have a hotel with 225 employees. We will get our PPP loan this week. We bring back about 50 to clean, etc. We have an all-employee meeting on 6:30. Will that qualify us for maximum forgiveness if after that we are still not open and have to lay them off again?
Well, as long as they're actually on the payroll right now, that would qualify. Like, you need to have actually paid them something, I think. That so that you can demonstrate that someone got paid. That is going to work given the current guidance. So in your scenario, you just need to make sure that you've actually used the money.
All right, next question from Anonymous. Is there an advantage to pay employee and employer health insurance costs during this 8-week period?
It would allow you to do a better job of utilizing the cash. Would you get any issues with modifications to your plan? That'd be a question for your health insurance provider.
All right, next question is from Joe. Though we submitted our application on day one with B of A, I used to work there, so I've heard this one a lot. They didn't review and have ready to submit to SBA until after it was too late. So we're waiting for funds to be added via legislation. Any issues with applying with more than one bank? And if we get accepted twice, we just pick one to accept, which at this point would be awesome to do with somebody that's not B of A. Yeah,
so in this scenario, for anybody that's with the bigger bank that's thinking, hey, maybe it's time for me to switch, you're gonna have to plan on the fact, I think at this point, of becoming a complete customer of that bank with at least your primary depository relationship. So, what that's gonna mean is if you've got like a line of credit outstanding with Bank of America and your deposit relationship is there, but then suddenly you move your deposit relationship, it really just means opening up a new account and then leaving a very limited funds in the deposit account that you have with Bank of America. There's going to be probably some downstream consequence to have to think about to replace the debt with the new bank at some point. But pretty much, if somebody's going to take you on at a different bank, now it's either you need to have already had a pretty good relationship with them, which means deposit and lending ideally, or at least deposit, or you're going to have to plan on moving. Is kind of the, I don't know if anybody's going to put that in writing, but I know that if we're going to stick our necks out by making a referral, we're going to follow through to make sure that you actually did move.
Yeah, I'll just confirm that with a few of the banks that were early on willing to take new customers without a lot of strings, Pinnacle Bank and Aquesta in particular, because they got a lot of stuff funded, but they are both saying no new customers yet, at least for PPP. We got to get through whoever's in the queue. We got to make sure they're covered. And if you're going to come over, plan on bringing everything. So, and I think that's fair at this point. So this is from Robert. If we pay prepaid payroll to stay in the 8-week period, then are you suggesting that post 8-week period, the employee would work for no additional compensation? Does that work for minimum wage rules?
So in my example, I wanted it to be 0 just to show you the calculation and how it would work. But you probably would need to pay at least minimum wage, which just means a longer period of time. I think the other thing that people are going to have to consider too, is that if this is going to end up being kind of a net benefit to you, like it was in the example in the dental practice, you might have to consider that at least for a period of time, when you're asking people to come back and during the period that you're continuing to pay them, it may just be that everybody needs to make at least what the $48,000 unemployment benefit was for this year only. I think that's going to be a case-by-case basis of how incentivized are people going to be to come on your payroll when they can make more on unemployment. In terms of, hey, I don't know, maybe somebody might ask, well, what am I going to make after that, boss? You may have to consider that for a brief period of time through the month of July, people are still going to need to make more than they would have made on unemployment. Haven't heard of anybody making the case, but I just feel like if you're trying to get maximum forgiveness, you're probably going to have to figure out how to do some sort of incentive to get people to work for you.
Hey, I got some good news here from Sandra. We just got our money from First Citizens Bank. Woohoo! That's the first one we've heard.
There you go.
I'll tell my neighbor who has a company, because he was spitting nails when he found out that they got blocked off. So this is from Anonymous. Following up on Vicky's question, we're planning on moving money piecemeal out of Bank 2 into Bank 1 for the specific amount of each expenditure. Once we're past the 8 weeks, we plan to move money back from Bank 1 to Bank 2. Is that okay?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that.
Next question. Our revenue has decreased by 40% since 3/1. However, we've been able to continue paying our employees, cutting hours from 36 to 30 hours per week. We pay bi-weekly. Do we need to do the maximum forgiveness calculation? And do you suggest we pay weekly, or is that only applicable to businesses that have stopped normal payroll?
I wouldn't change anything about my payroll period now, but if there's not further guidance by kind of early to mid-May, I would strongly consider going to a weekly payroll just to prove that you actually paid it versus having to take your bets on an accrual calculation.
Okay, this is from Cherie. My staff is making more money than they were making by working, so on unemployment. If we can't get the numbers of FTE, but pay the ones that are willing to come back to get to the 75% payroll, can we do that?
You can, but you're still going to have a reduced forgiveness calculation, which is where I would go back to. If you just can't flat out get people to come back to work, I think Gary's willing to be your employee. Gary's going to get 40 W-2s this year.
I don't have enough time in the day, and I'm really happy at BGW, so thanks anyway. Carolyn, are bonuses taxed at higher rates through payroll companies?
Yeah, so, I mean, you are going to have a temporary period. You can't really control for that unless you change the dependency amount. So the payroll run's going to calculate at whatever they believe the annualized rate would be at that new rate. So it's going to have more withholding on it, possibly than necessary.
This is from Terry. Please clarify loan forgiveness that group health premiums, 401k contributions, state and local employment taxes, and payroll are all considered towards the 75%.
Yes.
That was a nice, fast answer. This is from Amanda. The bill says you can use loan funds for health insurance costs. Do you get the benefit of the entire bill or just the amount the employer normally pays?
The amount the employer normally pays.
This is from Anonymous. If you claimed your dependent in 2018, but in 2019 did not claim him as a dependent, will he receive his stimulus check based upon his 2019 tax return filing?
If he'd already filed it, he should have.
This is from Thomas. Our application was based on or against 2019 headcount numbers. Now we're hearing that we should have we should be using Q1 FTE data for payroll. Question, which one should we use as the qualifier? 1, Q1 2020, 2, same period as 2019, which is what we submitted on our application, PPP 7A, or 3, different guidance and formula given by the SBA.
You would want to use whichever one's going to be the most advantageous. So we went over this a little bit earlier, but I'll go ahead and repeat it. You know, the period that you're comparing against when it comes to the forgiveness calculation, regardless of what you originally submitted, is one of the following. Because the law says at the election of the buyer or of the borrower, you know, either A, what you originally submitted, B, 2/15/2019 through 4/15/2019, or C, 1/1/2020 through 2/29/2020. Whichever one's going to be more favorable. They might end up issuing more guidance around that, but right now it reads that I could have used one period for the application, but a different period to compare against when I'm asking for forgiveness. And barring further guidance, you obviously want to use whichever one is going to be the most beneficial to you, which would typically mean the lowest FTE count.
Next question from Anonymous. Any clarification on how the FTE will be configured or be figured on 6/30? Is it during that week if we're using 30 hours ACA rules, since we have so many part-time employees working less than 20 hours?
Now, there's not really any guidance on the FTE count. So it, you know, whatever the calculation is, I would just be consistent. But when it comes to the count, let's say you failed the average FTE count test, so you're trying to get to the exception, which is they're just back on payroll. That's probably just going to be a count of the number of people.
Couple questions here from Richard. First one is, utility payments include transportation. What do you think that includes? That's the first question.
Again, transportation came out in the sole proprietor guidance. So a lot of people have been trying to apply that back to the main company guidance. So this may or may not stand, but they're pretty clear in the sole proprietor guidance that that was, you know, pretty much your vehicles. So what it takes for you, you know, whether that's car payment, you know, lease payment, gas, all that kind of stuff, counted for the sole proprietor. It may not end up counting for the company, but most folks that we're looking at, you know, they're going to use most of it on payroll anyway. They're not having a problem trying to get to the 25% number.
Follow-up question for Richard. Do utility payments also include waste removal?
Yeah, I probably would include that one.
Okay. This is from Melissa. Is there a place to look for government guidance on PPP that has been issued after the PPP legislation?
Yeah, I mean, the only two real authoritative sources right now are the Treasury's website, and they have a COVID-19 resource center, and then the IRS website. Outside of that, it's a bunch of people like us trying to offer interpretation, but those are the two authoritative sources, and all the SBA does currently is references back to those sources. So SBA isn't really publishing any original guidance. It's the IRS and the Treasury Department, and it's mostly the Treasury Department that's producing anything authoritative.
Okay, great. Any new insights into the status of the EIDL program?
People have started to get the grants, and you know, have started the process of the loans. So that seems like it's starting to actually have some movement.
Great. This is from Mike. Can we pay ourselves when we applied our pay? When we applied our pay, it was included in the application.
Yeah, you can pay yourself.
Well, for that. From Jan, can you make the worksheet available used in your opening calculation?
Yeah, we will.
We'll put that up on our website. Give us up to 24 hours for that, Jan. We're using an outside party to hang some of that stuff on our website. We're in the midst of switching all that stuff over at some point where we can self-administer better. Also, just as a reminder to everybody, this webinar will be posted back up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel, and it'll be up later on this afternoon. This is from Chris. I received $10,000 in EIDL funding today that was applied for prior to the PPP program. Was planning to not accept them, but didn't get the choice. Do you have any suggestions for documenting those fund expenditures or how they'll work with PPP?
Well, so you got the $10,000 grant, which was $1,000 per employee. That's just going to be removed from your forgiveness amount. So that, since it was a gift, it's just going to get removed. So that implies that you're conceivably going to have 10 grand in debt sitting at the very end. If you don't spend all the money on the PPP side. So what you can do is you can just not follow through on the loan, because the grant and the loan are unrelated. So the grant's just, here you go. The loan, though, would be the next step, and you could just not do the loan. So things aren't commingled.
This is from Joanne. We've received PPP funds, so we're now calculating FTE headcount for loan forgiveness. Our headcounts decreased from February 15 to April 26 measurement period. I understand if we restore the jobs by June 30th, we would not have a reduction in loan forgiveness for headcount changes. However, our 8-week loan period will end June 9. Do I still have until June 30th to restore the headcount?
No, because it's supposed to be, that's a little bit of confusing language in the law. I mean, the way we're reading it is that the job restoration has to occur during the loan forgiveness window, which is this 56 days. Because if it's, if you're supposed to be paying people, that means that you've got people. So I would plan on, it's got to be the forgiveness, the last day of forgiveness, not June 30th. The reason June 30th was there is because the loans were going to be, available through June 30th. But, unless they do round 3, round 4, round 5, I mean, this second round is going to be exhausted in a couple weeks.
Yeah, if it even lasts that long, I think. Second question from Joanne is, what if some of this headcount decreases due to employees resigning or terminations due to lack of performance? Are we still required to replace these employees due to non-COVID situations?
There's no guidance on that one. So I would assume that you're going to have to.
Yeah, again, it just goes back to headcount, right?
Yeah.
All right.
So I guess we could, not to get political, but because everybody remember I'm a libertarian, so nobody can get mad at me. I think this is a backdoor way of raising the federal minimum wage to $48,000. Because again, it's hard to get somebody to come back to work for lower pay unless there's some sort of carrot on the other side of it.
Yeah, true. This is from. This is good news. Just signed BB&T loan docs yesterday. It was about a week after underwriting done by bank and submitted to the SBA. So that's good news. From John, I've deferred rents from April. Our landlords are letting us pay this over July through December. So can I pay this during the 8 weeks too?
Yeah, we went for the rent abatement ourselves, and then once we were funded, paid rent. So I would go ahead and not, unless you're going to use all the money for payroll, then it's 6 of one, 1/2 dozen the other. But I would plan on going ahead and paying the rent even if you were granted an abatement, because why wouldn't you?
All right, this is from Arthi. We received $10,000 from SBA this morning. Does this mean we are approved for EIDL and will get additional funding amount?
I don't know of anybody who's actually gone through the loan process yet, just where you're at with the grant process. So no, it does not mean that you're approved and have an amount set aside at this point. That's going to be step 2.
All right, this is from Cherie. Last week you mentioned FTE count would be calculated as of June 1 only. Please clarify.
I don't know if I said that. It's as of the average FTE count is going to be calculated based on your loan forgiveness period relative to the 3 periods that I just spoke about. And basically what they're doing is they're saying, look, we accept that some crazy stuff happened from February 15th through April 27th. So if you bring those people back between April 27th and the date of your loan forgiveness period ending, I guess if you think about it, that's probably the last possible date that you could possibly receive funding and still be within the 8-week window going to June 30th when they came up with this rule. But your window to bring people back is your 56th day.
All right, cool. This is actually from Bob. He said regarding First Citizens, they funded 2 of our 3 PPP loans. One was signed on Wednesday and funded on Thursday. They've done a great job for us. That's good. Good to know, Bob. Thank you.
Bob didn't work for First Citizens, did he? I'm just kidding.
No. No. So that's good. This is from Vicky. Anything new on equipment rent? Would you include that as rent payment for a C or an S Corp?
Yeah, I would at this point. I mean, it may end up getting excluded, but I would at this point. In other words, like I'm going to use the least common denominator in QuickBooks with QuickBooks because, majority of our clients are on QuickBooks. Larger companies are going to be something different, especially if it's construction, manufacturing specific. But, I think if you just look through your general ledger and just tag the accounts you knew that qualify, that's where I would be focusing versus doing any other rigmarole in extra tracking. I mean, it should be as simple as, hey, just make sure you code stuff to the right account. And it's easy enough just to go ahead and flag which account numbers are going to be the ones that you're going to need to look at for the forgiveness calculation.
All right, cool. This is from Joanne. We've received PPP funds, so we're now calculating payroll costs and determining who's over 100K to exclude amounts over that limit. Those with base wages over 100K is straightforward. I have several employees that earn commissions or are eligible for overtime, both of which may push them over the $100,000 limit by the end of the year. Do you know how the guidance is going to interpret this calculation, as we're unable to accurately calculate or project who may be?
I think it's only going to matter for what happened in the 8-week period. So as long as on an annualized basis, they're not making over 100 grand in the 8-week period, that's what's going to matter. Now, if somebody ends up the year at 150, but during that 8-week period, they only made 100, I think you're going to be fine.
This is another good news about First Citizens from Phil, who doesn't look like he's a loan officer there. We got funded by First Citizens, so that's good.
All right, that's good. Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to get a beer from Alan Sprinkle ever again.
This is from John. We signed our loan documents yesterday from PNC. That's great.
Cool.
Andrew Krasinski over there, and there are a lot of good folks over there, but he has done a great job for a lot of our clients. So I pay someone over 100K salary. What do I do? This is from Terry. It's capped, right?
So we're not, we're still going to be fine on our forgiveness calculation, and we haven't asked anybody over $100,000 to take a reduction. All that said, I would have had that in my playbook if I felt like I needed it. And if I needed to make it up to them on the backside, so it was only a temporary cut, then I probably would have. So I think that's going to be a case-by-case basis for you. If you can get there on the forgiveness amount without doing a reduction and not run out of cash, then I wouldn't change anything. But if it looks like you need to do something from a cash flow perspective, I probably would ask the person to take a temporary reduction.
Okay, this is a time check. It's 11:59. We know that some people only had an hour for this, but typically, and today will be no exception, we'll have had about 70 questions that we'll have answered. So we're going to keep rocking. We've got 21 open questions right now. So again, if you have to bail off, that's fine. We will have this up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel yet later on this afternoon that you can go back and listen to whatever you missed. This is from Chris.
I am in fact wearing PJ bottoms.
I was tempted to pull that off, but I thought, no, I'm not going to embarrass you.
I'm channeling my inner John Krasinski.
Love it. Chris has asked, any idea of life insurance premiums on employees' lives are being eligible for payroll costs?
I'd plan on it not. I mean, no, we saw 0 banks that included that in the calculation. So I would expect that it's not going to be part of the forgiveness amount.
Are vehicle leases now being considered a forgivable expense?
The same caveat, it was in the sole proprietor language, which implies that it's going to be in the business language, but it may not be. So I would look to try to get there without it, but know that I have that in my bag of tricks if I need it.
So this is from Stephanie. I didn't get the loan from First Citizens. Am I with the wrong bank? I think, the reality is there are a lot of banks out there that, they had more demand than what they could supply. And so I don't know that we can answer that question, but any thoughts from you, Adam, on that?
Yeah, I think the unfortunate thing that happened is a lot of the larger banks waited for more guidance from the Treasury Department on what their risk was going to be with respect to forgiveness before they really started diving in and processing applications. Whereas with the community banks, they just said, to hell with it, we're going for it. So I think what you're seeing, and it said it's not a knock on First Citizens. I mean, it's a very good bank. It's just that they were later in the game in terms of processing applications, which meant that their customers were just going to get a smaller chunk. So if you're with First Citizens, I would find out the status of you being eligible in round 2, which again will hopefully happen today if it hasn't happened already. And if not, I mean, I think if you really need the funding, then by default that means you're going to have to go somewhere else.
So this is from Melissa. One of the banks you mentioned has had trouble funding much. Told us that our loan was underwritten, but the SBA number hadn't been assigned yet. So we missed out on round number 1. We'll be in queue for round 2. Is that consistent with what you've heard? Pretty much.
It's not. I don't know if you're necessarily going to get that in writing, but that's what should occur. Is that every bank that couldn't get somebody funded in round 1 should be having those customers lined up first in round 2.
Yeah, it depends on who the bank is. BB&T in particular, I've heard that, hey, there's no guarantees on round 2. They're, I think, trying to set expectations because I think a lot of expectations were missed on round 1. So I'd say just stay in contact with those bankers that you're dealing with and get as much of an honest answer as you can. Terry, if I pay somebody over $100,000 in salary, but only use $100,000 paid from PPP and remainder from another source, that's acceptable, right?
Yeah, totally acceptable. That's more of a cash flow decision.
I think the 10K disaster money will go into our bank tomorrow, but we'll get our PPP money later this week. Do I just need to tell somebody, and who, that I received this 10K so that my PPP can be reduced?
It's not that it gets reduced, it gets added to, but it's factored into the forgiveness amount.
We have a triple net lease with a related party. Is the full amount or just base amount included in loan forgiveness calculation?
So that, I mean, when you're saying full amount, in that case, the rent itself will be included, but you're picking up the utilities on your end. So that would be the full amount, I would think.
This is from Barry. Do employees?
We have a gross lease with Beacon, which means they're picking up the utilities. So I don't have any utilities other than telecom expense. But if it was a triple net lease where I'm in charge of all my own stuff, then the numbers should work out to be the same regardless.
This is from Barry. First of all, they received their BB&T loan yesterday, which is awesome. And do employees on temporary leave count towards the head count?
If you are still paying them on temporary leave and you have not, so if you're still paying them while they're on temporary leave, I believe they would count in the head count. If you applied for a credit against their wages, then they're not going to factor into the forgiveness calculation.
Okay, sorry to ask this again, but what are the FTE date ranges I need to use to calculate number of employees I need to bring back to have 100%?
Either the original reporting period when you submitted your application in the first place, or February 15th through June 30th, which technically 2019, or January and February of 2020. Versus your 8-week period for PPP.
Okay, this is from Brian. We got our PPP loan for $220,000 last Monday. We were told by your staff to hold off and not spend it yet, as BGW is waiting further guidance from the feds. With the 8-week clock ticking now, what happens if we keep waiting for guidance and we get to the point where we don't have enough time to meet payroll spending portion of the forgiveness calculation?
That was why I did the illustrative example in the beginning. So in this scenario, if you're at the point where you're don't have any revenue and you're struggling with how do you bring the employees back, then you bring them back similar to the example that we gave you, that we did at the beginning, which is you're going to have to spend a lot of money in 4 weeks, even though you've got an 8-week period. So really, this all becomes, a bet on two things. One is, when do I think I'll generate a revenue again? And two, can I actually get employees to come back if they're making more on unemployment right now? So, that's why I would plan, pending further guidance, not necessarily worrying right now about bringing people back if I don't have any revenue, but plan on needing to bring people back probably early to mid-May, to meet your window, assuming you can get the math to work. I mean, right now it really is just a math problem.
Okay, this is somebody considering moving to another bank. Said we had our PPP application submitted on 4/4, but we're told by the bank that we didn't get submitted into the SBA first round. This bank only pushed through 15% of all the applications, and now they say that they will try to get my app through next go round. What's the likelihood that they will not get my app through again?
That's really hard to say. Again, assuming this is a larger bank, again, think about what happened. They didn't really know what they were doing. They were waiting for guidance, and they tried to automate a bunch of stuff. And that was the result of getting 15%. If they shook out the bugs, then it should go through, assuming that the funding is available. Whereas with community banks, man, that was all hands on deck, people working weekends, doing a bunch of manual work to get their applications in. It wasn't very automated. So I think that's a big difference. So I would, I'd be more concerned about funds availability versus a submission at this point. So if you actually have a live body over there, that's who I'd be trying to get in touch with.
This is from Robert. If an employer is willing to give the job back to an unemployed employee of theirs, that should negate the eligibility of unemployment compensation. So the employment the employee has no option to just stay on unemployment. They either take the job or they're without income. Do you agree?
Well, that's a great philosophy, but how are you going to inform the state of that decision? In other words, philosophically, that's correct. But remember, right now, the employee is just self-reporting. And, if you think that you're going to be able to get on the phone with somebody at the Employment Security Commission to rat somebody out, I hate using that in air quotes. Good luck with that. In other words, that would not be my strategy, because while technically correct, I just don't think it's practical.
This is from Thomas. If we meet the dollar amount of payroll, do we still need to meet the FTE qualifier?
Yes, as it stands currently.
Follow-up question to dependent son that filed as a non-dependent, submitted tax return a week ago. Do you think he will get a stimulus check?
I would hope so.
Okay. Terry, I'm not sure what that is. So Terry, if you want to resubmit, there are a couple things there that I don't understand. Jeremy, what advice would you give to employers that have self-funded health insurance plan in supporting cost of employee medical benefits for the purposes of loan forgiveness, since cash flows can vary from month to month?
Oh, that's a good question. In this particular instance, I would consider adding on maybe an HSA and funding that. At the end of the day, if somebody doesn't have medical claims, they don't have medical claims. And the problem that you're faced in this specific instance is that, it's actually difficult to have a medical claim right now because nobody will see you. So in that case, I probably would say, hey, can I get an HSA moving pretty quickly and have that count?
Can you get PPP and EIDL?
Yeah, you just can't use it for the same thing for the same period.
This is from somebody anonymous. We got our EIDL loan docs signed from the SBA this weekend, and deposit for $500K arrived in our account today. That's good news.
Wow, that's the first one I've heard of.
Yep. If you're not first, you're last. It's good to be first. Plug for Regions Bank as well from David. Cool. We received PPP funding into our account last Thursday. We had payroll disbursement on Friday for the pay period of 3/29 to 4/10. Does that count for our 56-day period of time?
Technically it should not, but this goes back to, are we cash basis or accrual basis on this? So I probably would, unless I'm at a reduced headcount number right now, I probably wouldn't be worrying too much about the forgiveness calculation until a little bit later in the month. If I am at the reduced forgiveness calculation right now, I would include it, but have a contingency plan in case I can't include it. Which goes back to paying people weekly. If you pay 2 weeks in arrears, if you have to do, the catch up of that 2 weeks, go for it. Pay people out their PTO, whatever you got to do.
This is another one regarding headcount. For headcount before PPP, do we take our payroll headcount numbers for every payroll in that window and average the headcount to get our number that we use to bring back our 100%?
Yeah, for us it was easy because we know the hours people work, and we know what full-time looks like to get to our headcount. That's what you do.
Regarding unemployment, what's the threshold of part-time reduced hours employment before the employee would lose their $600 federal unemployment benefit? Is there a dollar amount or a number of hours that would prevent receiving the federal unemployment stipend?
I don't know the answer to that question because I don't think there's kind of a bright line test on that. I think it's more of a certification process, and then you as the employer, like I have heard that employers still have to certify if the person is eligible to file for unemployment. It's supposed to be significant though. So losing out on 1 hour and not really much other than 1 hour's pay. I mean, you really shouldn't be applying, but I guess it's technically possible if the employer actually agreed to the claim. Oh, you froze, Gary. Still there? Hey, Gary. All right. Don't know what happened to him, but I'm going to try to take over here and see what other questions that we have. All right. So for the stimulus check, what if 2018 direct deposit bank account was closed? Man, that's a tough one because you can't really get on the phone with the IRS right now. They're not really taking any calls. There is, I think, a form that you're supposed to be able to fill out, but that's what you'd have to do is to change your account with the IRS. That's really the only recourse that you're going to have on that one. All right. So, any other questions from anybody on the call? See if we got anything in the chat room over here. All right. Yeah, it looks like we don't have anything in the chat room. All right, so with that in mind, I do thank everybody for the call. It's funny, Gary just, we got a question in. It's funny, Gary just got a new computer, so this wasn't supposed to happen to him. I've heard the threshold of 420 week would prevent an employee from receiving the $600. That could be true. I don't know the answer to that, and I would agree that that does seem pretty low because it was supposed to apply to really anybody. I didn't think there was an income threshold associated with that. So anyway, want to thank everybody on the call. And again, we'll be back again on Thursday. In the meantime, appreciate all you guys. And thank you very much. Hold on, we got maybe one last one. Sorry, guys. Oh, holy technical difficulties. Hopefully Gary edits this part out. Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate you guys being on the call today, and we'll see you again on Thursday.